Grandpa Ned's weathered hands trembled as he signed the hospital discharge papers, still tender from where the surgeons had taken his left kidney 3 days ago. At 72 years old, most men would be thinking about retirement cruises and Sunday golf. But Ned had just done something far more profound, given a piece of himself to save his son's life. What he didn't know was that this ultimate act of love would lead to the most devastating betrayal imaginable, and a doctor's revelation that would turn his entire world upside down. The fluorescent lights of County General Hospital buzzed overhead as Ned shuffled toward the exit, one hand pressed against his bandaged side. His son Marcus hadn't come to pick him up. The nurses said he'd called, claiming an important business meeting. So Ned had called a cab, swallowing the disappointment like bitter medicine. "You sure you'll be okay, Mr. Patterson?" asked Jenny, the young nurse who'd been checking on him since the surgery. Her eyes held genuine concern. "I'll be fine, sweetheart," Ned replied with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Going home to my son's place. He'll take good care of me during recovery." If only he'd known how wrong he was. The cab ride to Marcus's upscale suburban home took 20 minutes. Ned watched the manicured lawns and expensive cars blur past his window, thinking about the journey that had brought him here. 6 months ago, Marcus had been diagnosed with end-stage renal disease. The prognosis was grim: dialysis indefinitely or a transplant. The waiting list was years long, and Marcus's condition was deteriorating rapidly. Without hesitation, Ned had volunteered for testing. He was a match, perfect compatibility, the doctors said, like it was meant to be. Marcus had cried when they told him, hugging his father for the first time in years. "You're saving my life, Dad," he'd whispered. "I'll never forget this. Never." Those words echoed in Ned's mind as he paid the driver and slowly made his way up the pristine brick walkway to Marcus's front door. He still had his key from the spare set Marcus had given him months ago, back when he'd first moved in to help care for his ailing son. The house was quiet when he entered, too quiet. "Marcus," Ned called out, his voice echoing in the marble-floored entryway. "Marcus, I'm home from the hospital." Footsteps thundered down the stairs, but they weren't the slow, careful steps of someone recovering from a major surgery. Marcus appeared at the landing, looking healthier than Ned had seen him in months. His face was flushed, his eyes hard. "Dad, we need to talk." Something in Marcus's tone made Ned's blood run cold. "Is everything okay? Are you feeling all right? The doctors said you'd need to rest." "I'm fine," Marcus cut him off, descending the stairs with surprising vigor. "The kidney's working great, better than expected, actually." "That's wonderful, son," Ned smiled, relief flooding through him despite the strange tension in the air. "I was so worried." "Dad, I need you to move out." The words hit Ned like a physical blow. He staggered, catching himself against the wall. "What?" Marcus wouldn't meet his eyes. "You need to find somewhere else to live. This arrangement isn't working anymore." "But I just gave you my kidney 3 days ago. I'm still recovering. The doctors said I need 8 weeks before." "There are recovery facilities," Marcus said coldly, examining his fingernails. "Extended stay hotels. You have your pension, your social security. You'll figure it out." Ned felt his legs go weak. He lowered himself onto the bottom step, staring at this stranger who wore his son's face. "I don't understand. What happened? What did I do wrong?" "Nothing," Marcus's jaw clenched. "You didn't do anything wrong. This is just, Linda and I have been talking." Linda was Marcus's wife, a woman who'd always treated Ned with barely concealed disdain. "We need our space back, our privacy. Having you here, it's been difficult." "Difficult?" Ned's voice cracked. "Marcus, I'm your father. I just saved your life." "And I'm grateful," Marcus said, but his tone suggested otherwise. "Really, I am, but that doesn't mean you get to live here forever. We had an arrangement. You'd stay until I recovered from surgery. Well, I'm recovering, so it's time for you to go." "I'm still recovering too." Ned pressed his hand to his bandaged side, where pain flared with each breath. "Please, son, just give me a few weeks until I'm strong enough to." "I want you out by tomorrow." Marcus turned away, heading toward the kitchen, Pack your things tonight. Linda's brother needs to stay here for a while, and we need your room." Ned sat on that step for a long time after Marcus disappeared into the house. Tears he hadn't shed since his wife died 5 years ago finally came, hot and shameful, against his weathered cheeks. How had it come to this? How had the boy he'd raised, the son he'd taught to ride a bike and helped through college, become someone who could discard him like trash? That night, Ned packed his meager belongings with shaking hands, each movement sending jolts of pain through his healing incision. He had nowhere to go. His small apartment had been given up when he'd moved in with Marcus. His pension barely covered the basics. His few friends had either passed away or moved to be closer to their own families. He was alone. The next morning, Marcus didn't even say goodbye. Ned called another cab, loaded his 2 suitcases, and left the house where he'd hoped to spend his recovery surrounded by family. Instead, he checked into a budget motel on the edge of town, a dingy place that smelled of cigarettes and desperation. The physical pain was nothing compared to the emotional agony. As Ned lay on the lumpy motel bed, he wondered if he'd made a terrible mistake. Not in giving the kidney, he'd do that again in a heartbeat, but in believing that his sacrifice meant something, that love and family mattered more than convenience. 2 days later, weak and feverish, Ned dragged himself to his follow-up appointment at the hospital. He'd developed a fever the night before, and the pain in his side had intensified. Infection, he suspected. Maybe he deserved it. Dr. Sarah Chen, the surgeon who'd performed the transplant, took one look at him and immediately ordered tests. "Mr. Patterson, you look terrible. Have you been resting?" following the post-op instructions. Ned said nothing about being kicked out. What was the point? But Dr. Chen was thorough. As she examined him, she asked careful questions. Where was he staying? Was his son helping him? Was he getting proper nutrition? Finally, exhausted and defeated, Ned told her everything. Dr. Chen's face went pale, then red, then pale again. "He kicked you out 3 days after major surgery." "It's his house," Ned said quietly. "He has a right to." "Mr. Patterson, you need to come with me right now, Doctor." Chen's voice was sharp with urgency. "There's something about your son's case you need to know, something we discovered after the transplant that changes everything." Confused and frightened, Ned followed her to a private office. Dr. Chen pulled up files on her computer, her hands moving quickly across the keyboard. When she turned the screen toward him, her expression was grave. "We ran additional tests on your son after the transplant. Standard procedure. Mr. Patterson," she paused, choosing her words carefully, "your son's kidney disease wasn't just bad luck. The tissue analysis showed markers consistent with chronic cocaine abuse." Ned felt the room spin. What? Marcus's kidney failure was self-induced. Years of drug use destroyed his renal function. And there's more. Dr. Chen pulled up another file. "We found evidence that he never told you this because he was afraid you wouldn't donate if you knew the truth." The pieces began to fall into place. Marcus's mysterious business trips. The expensive house he could somehow afford despite claiming financial troubles. Linda's hostility, had she known, had she resented Ned's presence because his very existence was a reminder of her husband's deception. "But that's not all," Dr. Chen continued, her voice softer now. "Mr. Patterson, I did some checking after you told me what happened. Your son took out a life insurance policy on you 3 months ago, a significant one." Ned's blood turned to ice. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that I'm concerned about your safety. I'm saying that kicking you out 3 days post-op, when you're at your most vulnerable, when infection or complications could be fatal." She met his eyes. "I'm saying this needs to be reported, and you need to be somewhere safe." The full horror of it crashed over Ned like a wave. His son hadn't just used him for a kidney. He'd hoped the surgery would kill him, or that the complications afterward would. The inheritance, the life insurance, it all made terrible sense. Dr. Chen made some calls. Within hours, a social worker arrived, along with a hospital administrator and eventually a detective. They moved Ned to a protected room in the hospital while they investigated. The motel charges were covered by a hospital emergency fund. Over the next week, as Ned recovered properly for the first time, the full story emerged. Marcus had been living far beyond his means, funded by drugs and debt. He'd seen his father's kidney as a solution and his father's death as an even better one. Linda had been complicit, knowing about the insurance policy. But there was something else Dr. Chen discovered, something that made her smile when she shared it with Ned. "Mr. Patterson, we did extensive compatibility testing before your donation. You're not just a good match for Marcus. You're a perfect match for several people on the transplant waiting list who are young, deserving, and have years of life ahead of them. Your remaining kidney is healthy, strong. You could potentially donate again in the future through paired exchange programs or living donation chains." "Why are you telling me this?" Ned asked, though something warm had begun to kindle in his chest. "Because you deserve to know that your gift isn't wasted. Yes, Marcus doesn't deserve what you gave him, but that kidney is saving a life, and you still have the capacity to save others if you choose to. Some people spend their whole lives looking for purpose, Mr. Patterson. You've found yours." The legal proceedings took months. Marcus and Linda were charged with fraud and attempted murder. The life insurance policy was voided. Ned testified, his voice steady as he recounted his son's betrayal. But something unexpected happened during those months. The story got out, local news, then national. The father who donated a kidney only to be cast aside by his ungrateful son. The public was outraged. Donations poured in, more than enough for Ned to find a small apartment and live comfortably. But the money wasn't what changed Ned's life. It was the letters, hundreds of them, from people thanking him for his sacrifice, sharing their own stories of donation and family. Families of transplant recipients reaching out to express gratitude for people like him who gave selflessly. And then there was Emma. Emma was 19, a college student with her whole life ahead of her. She was dying of kidney disease. When she heard Ned's story, she wrote him a letter. Just a simple thank you, she said, for showing what true sacrifice looked like, for giving her hope that there were still good people in the world. They began corresponding. Ned learned about Emma's dreams of becoming a teacher, her love of old movies, her close relationship with her grandmother who'd raised her. Emma learned about Ned's late wife, his years as a carpenter, his love of fishing. When Emma's condition worsened, Ned didn't hesitate. He underwent testing, another perfect match. 1 year after Marcus's betrayal, Ned walked into surgery again. This time, he knew exactly what he was doing and why. Dr. Chen led the surgical team personally, tears in her eyes as she prepped him. "You're remarkable," she told him. "You know that, right?" "I'm just a father," Ned replied. "Even if my son forgot what that meant, I didn't." The surgery was successful. Emma thrived with her new kidney. She visited Ned during his recovery, holding his hand and calling him Grandpa Ned, a title he wore with more pride than any blood relation had ever given him. Marcus served 3 years in prison. When he got out, he tried to contact his father. Ned read the letter once, then put it away. Forgiveness, he'd learned, didn't mean forgetting. It didn't mean allowing yourself to be hurt again. But it did mean choosing to let go of bitterness and finding new purpose in the wreckage. 5 years later, Ned walked Emma down the aisle at her wedding. Her grandmother was there too, beaming with pride. Dr. Chen attended as a guest. The church was filled with people Ned had met through transplant advocacy work, recipients, donors, families grateful for the awareness he'd helped raise. As Ned watched Emma dance with her new husband, both of them healthy and radiant, he touched his side where 2 kidneys used to be. The scars had faded, but they'd taught him something profound. The size of your sacrifice doesn't determine its worth. The recipient's gratitude does. He'd given the same gift twice. One had been wasted on someone who couldn't appreciate it. One had bloomed into something beautiful, a life saved, and a family gained. And in the end, Ned realized that was the doctor's real message that day in the hospital. Not just that his son had betrayed him, but that his capacity for love and sacrifice was too valuable to be defined by one person's cruelty. Some gifts are wasted, others change the world. Grandpa Ned had learned to know the difference.